Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Baby Wearing and Breastfeeding, Nurturing Miracles. It is the podcast where we deep dive into everything baby wearing and breastfeeding, specifically tailored to medically complex kids. I'm your host, Megan Pa, and I am here today with Julia Cooke, and we are going to be talking about the moment of diagnosis. And I'm incredibly honored and excited that Julia is here because she is a mom of 4, and not only does she have 4 kids, but she's got a brand new baby. And we all know how difficult it is to do anything when we have a brand new baby, let alone 4. And what I also want to just add, which I think is really funny, is that we are doing this at almost 9 o'clock at night when the babies are in bed. So pretty much the only time that moms get to do stuff. So Julia, thank you so much for being here today. We had the privilege of meeting through a lactation consult, and that's kind of how we got connected. And I'm really excited about you just sharing your journey. So if you could talk a little bit about how your birth story, I think would be super interesting, and the just how you came to find Anna Louisa's diagnosis.
Yeah, well, Megan, thanks so much for having me. This is exciting. So my daughter, Anna Louisa, is 7 weeks old. And I met Megan the day after she was born, I think the morning after she was born, right? When everything was just like a total blur. So Anna Louisa has Down syndrome, which we did not know until she was born. And I mean, I guess, where do I start? Yeah, like when I was pregnant with Anna Louisa, so I'd always wanted 4 kids. And after my husband and I found out that I was pregnant, I started having this kind of this ominous sense that there was something wrong with the baby. And it was thought that did I ever tell you that when we were?
I think we had one conversation about it, but I'm so glad you're mentioning it because I am a huge believer in a mother's intuition. You know, just feeling like something is not quite right, you know? So I definitely I want you to tell it again.
Yeah, and I've become a much bigger believer in that after having her. And there have even been some other experiences in dealing with some of her medical issues where my husband and I kind of both had a sense about something, or for me, it's been like an intuition about something. And I've just kind of followed that gut feeling, or I haven't followed it and it's been bad. It's not like that bad. She's doing great. But I had this sense when I was pregnant that there might be something wrong with the baby. And I just kind of pushed that idea away because, why would I want to dwell on that? And I kind of thought, like, well, maybe there's, like, what's wrong with me that my mind keeps going there? Like, am I crazy? What's wrong with me? But I do remember being in the ultrasound clinic, kind of waiting for the doctor to come in and go over my results with me. And again, having that sense and just feeling really like wanting them to find something wrong in the ultrasound, and then thinking I was a terrible person for feeling that way. And so it's just not something I thought about that much. So I didn't think about her. I didn't think about the baby that much, because when I did think about the baby, my mind went to that place and I didn't want to go there. So it was a difficult pregnancy for me mentally, I think, because if you're not thinking about the baby, and, I had uncomfortable or painful symptoms when I was pregnant. Like it was physically a tough pregnancy. I was just kind of like getting through it, trying to push through it. But even when I got to the end, I still wasn't picturing what life would be like once I had the baby. We didn't know the gender either, which I like to do. I like to kind of keep it a little bit of a blank, so I'm not projecting my own thoughts onto who this person is going to be. We actually don't even pick out the name until we meet the baby. But, so I do keep it a blank, but I also almost didn't want to think about it. And it's something I didn't totally consciously realize until I've had time to think about this now in the past several weeks. So you asked me about the birth story. So I had the same midwife as Megan, Story Jones, who's phenomenal. And she had her assistant, Sarah Tarter, who's also phenomenal. And has now, I think, gone on to, I think she's officially maybe like a certified midwife at this point. So I was like one of the babies. Anna Louise was one of the babies who helped her reach her goal of delivering 40 babies. But yeah, so I had a home birth and everything was going well. And I was in the bathtub, about to deliver the baby. And, she was my 4th baby, and I've had them all naturally. And things were kind of going I knew it was coming. And I started pushing, and it was when I was pushing that, again, with this intuition, I didn't know what was wrong, but I just started panicking.
Yeah.
And it was also became very painful. And I mean, having a baby is very painful, but it was different.
The anxiety makes it more like that.
Yeah, I was scared.
Yeah.
And when
Makes
you're
it more
scared, your
painful.
body. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's even like a one of the natural childbirth tips is, oh, don't be scared because otherwise it's more painful, And I heard myself kind of like, I was screaming because I was pushing the baby, but I started like really screaming, and I was like, what is going on? And then Sarah kind of she helped the baby's head come out. I don't know what she did, but she did something, and then she put the baby, against me, and I felt that she was just completely limp. She was like a wet bag of sand. But nobody else had noticed yet that she was like that. Mm-hmm. So I got on my bed and I said, well, what just happened? And Sarah and the store were like, you just had a baby. But I couldn't calm down. I was still panicked. Yeah. And I noticed there was something kind of different about her eyes. And again, she was just totally limp. Even though she was crying, so we knew she was okay. Like that, I mean, they knew she was okay. She was showing vital signs and stuff, but when I held her, I just recognized how limp she was. But yeah, and so then Story got on the bed with me, and she kind of expertly, she must do that. I mean, she's obviously a professional, but they were taking my blood pressure, and she's like, can I hold the baby? And maybe that's when she always examines the babies. I'm sure she does, but it wasn't in my mind that, she's checking the baby out to just take a look at her. But she was kind of holding her up and lifting her arm up and down, and her arm would drop down, and she was examining her palms and stuff. And she just said very matter of factly, have you noticed her low muscle tone? And I said, yes. And she said, have you noticed the shape of her eyes? And I said, yes. And she says, I think that there's a strong likelihood she has Down syndrome. And when she said that, I was kind of like, it's not what I was expecting, but I wasn't surprised.
Yeah. What I want to peel that back. So it's really interesting how this entire time you had an intuition about it. You also said that in some ways it sounded like you had a harder time bonding with her during the pregnancy because of that subconscious fear, but you didn't want to acknowledge it because you're like, does that make me a bad mom, that I think that something is wrong? And that makes it's so challenging as a woman when we're pregnant, when intuitively we think that something's wrong, but it's like we also have that fear where we've got to just push that aside because we want it to be perfect and healthy. And then when she was born and it was confirmed, like, okay, well, there's a high likelihood that she has Down syndrome. Did you feel a sense of, that makes sense to me? Like I connecting that to how you felt when you were pregnant.
Yes, it did. And it was almost like, yes, it's like things kind of clicked into place. And I mean, again, I had just given birth, and so everything was a blur.
Yes.
And so it was really only when I thought back on it in the next couple of weeks that I realized, this was the final piece of the puzzle, was when she was born. There's the intuition I had when I was pregnant. Then there was the birth where, my body, was like, my body knew.
Yeah.
I hadn't mentally processed exactly what it was, but my body knew. And then, she was born and she got the diagnosis.
Yeah. How did you react? Like, how did your partner react? Like, do the two of you react similarly?
No.
Yeah.
No, we don't. But both of us are pretty low key. I tend to not emotionally react right away.
Yeah.
Like when something, when I'm like shared, like, so when she told me that, and again, I did, God had prepared me through this intuition.
Yep.
for the diagnosis. So it wasn't totally out of the blue. I wasn't expecting this beautiful, healthy baby, right? I mean, she was beautiful. And she is thriving in amazing ways, which I can share later. But yeah, so I was kind of like, my initial reaction is to kind of just continue the conversation without anybody being able to read my face. I don't know why I react that way, but that's just how I am. So I was like, oh, really? You know,
it's like you need a minute to process it, though, right? It's like you need to process it yourself before you kind of share like with other people how you're feeling. Does that connect with what you're thinking?
I'm a slower emotional processor, I think. And I've gotten much better, I think, at processing my emotions. You know, things. I mean, the Lord has helped me to do that, but you know, my husband, who's also pretty low key, you know, he cried, and I cried when he cried. But when Story shared the information with him, he wasn't in the room. He came in a few minutes later, and I said, I think I said, Alex, I think the baby has Down syndrome, and he kind of looked stunned. You know, his face was stunned, and he asked for a few minutes, if we could have a few minutes on our own with the baby. And then he cried, and I started crying too. And he was just like, you know, we live in a broken, fallen world. And, you know, that's where we're both Christians, and that's where he went right away. And I went there with him. I said, yeah. But we also, you know, Story is also a Christian. And I think with patients who she knows are Christian, she'll use that as part of how she kind of ministers to her patients. And she said, you know, she is beautifully and fearfully and wonderfully made by God. You know, God has a purpose for her life. And that was really special, because if we had been in a hospital, I don't think we would have heard that.
Nope. Yeah. I love that about Story. I love that she shared that with you. I'm glad that you brought it up, because there's something that I didn't get right away, with my own son's diagnosis, but I got it later on. And I think sometimes when we have a medically complex baby and we're getting their diagnoses, and you don't know like what's going to happen, you can't see the future, and nobody's giving you, like, that's one thing I think is so hard as a parent. And you can share on this, and you know, how things progress as you're going to see her doctors and you're hearing from her cardiologist, and no one's giving you clear cut, like, this is the path, this is exactly what's going to happen. You don't know. And so there might be a moment where you're questioning, and you're like, well, why, God? Like, why does my baby have to have this? And, you know, what I heard later on is that it's actually not necessarily about you. It's not necessarily about me. Maybe he needed, or, you know, she needed, this is part of their story. And for whatever reason, this is their path to walk. And it doesn't even have to be like this, viewed in a negative light, but it could be part of their story. That's a beautiful thing about them, that they're going to like overcome and share and help others with, or, you know, however you want to view it, but it's part of their journey and something that they needed. And so I think that a lot of times when it might be a different thing, like what Story said to you, or what I actually took in. I think I was reading a book, but took in about the circumstance that is so beneficial to help us process, like that one little thing that just helps us connect and process and be like, okay, I get that. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I read, my father-in-law sent my husband and me an article. I think it was like a Wall Street Journal, or it was First Things article, where the guy is talking about what it was like when they found out that their daughter had Down syndrome, and just how surprised and moved he was when at last they heard from somebody who told them congratulations. You know, that the family acted as though someone had died. You know, the pediatrician said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." You know, we never got that, actually.
Never got?
No,
Yeah.
We didn't. And so, I mean, and I'm still probably processing her diagnosis, because as of now, she is just this wonderful little baby.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's such a joy. I've been told that she may have delays in walking and talking and things like. So I think the hard stuff may come later. Right now, I'm just enjoying her so much. But I think a huge part of that, is the way that people around us reacted.
Yeah.
I think it would have been different if we had received the diagnosis before she was born. I know that's how it was with you and Tyson, right?
But and I actually love so much what you're saying, and it makes me even more grateful that you were willing to come on and talk to me about it, because you're absolutely right. Like, people need to be able to see some of these diagnoses and still come to you and be like, congratulations. Do you know what I mean? Like, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
mm-hmm.
My God, look at this beautiful baby girl that you have that has been gifted and blessed into your family. And the fact that, like, the response was not that, like, that's, now you've got this whole other layer to process. Yeah. So I'm really glad that you are being so generous to come on and talk, because when people hear you say that, if they have a family member or friend that has a baby with Down syndrome, now they'll know. Now they can say to them, like, congratulations on your beautiful child. You know what I mean? Like, that's so important. Yeah.
Well, and I would not necessarily have known how to respond to somebody, right? They're also going to somewhat mirror your reaction. And, I maybe it was in part how Story started us off with just, this child was from the Lord. But I never, when you're holding your baby, I never was angry with God. I felt sad a little bit, but when you're holding your baby, you love them so much. And the fears that I had were more about what the future was going to be like.
Yeah.
But I thought I pretty quickly was just like, I'm not going to go there, because who knows what the future is going to hold. I'm just going to enjoy her, first days of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so speaking of that, can you talk and walk us through a little bit about those first few weeks and how, what you had to do to set up, like, her medical team and go through her appointments and all of that, and what your experience there was?
Yeah. I think another reason why Down syndrome was not something that we sort of were immediately focusing so much on was because she did have some other medical issues that were immediately apparent, or relatively immediately. So, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before you started recording, which was, when you have a home birth and there's an unexpected medically complex child who's just been born, how does Story know what to do? But she was great. And she said, you should probably get an echocardiogram as soon as you can, because I think they would do that at the hospital. There are a couple other things she said, but they come back the next day also to just check out the mom, check out baby, and they found that Anna Louisa had a low oxygen saturation level. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Oxygenation. Yeah. Her pulse ox was low, and she said, you should definitely try to get the echocardiogram as soon as you can. So by day 4 of her life, there was a last minute cancellation, because normally you have to wait like a month for these appointments. We got in at Nova Fairfax's pediatric cardiology office, and my husband said, I think God's been giving us what we need. So I'm a little concerned that we got this appointment so last minute and easily. And she did have a ventricular septal defect, which was the cardiologist later let it slip. It was big, and he didn't mention this, but when we researched, we found out it was probably open heart surgery would be required. And I had noticed she was panting. It was hard for her to breathe. She was very just not alert. Newborns are pretty groggy and stuff too, but that was kind of the big one was, she's been alive for 3 days, and we're in the waiting room of the cardiologist's office, and that was difficult. But kind of just doing it, right? You hit the ground running. She, as you remember, her nursing was also difficult at first, and we were having to feed her a syringe, and so that was the whole thing. But I mean, do you want me to keep talking about her heart? Because I don't know what I've shared with you because I haven't seen you since she was
I
like 3 weeks
know.
old.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Please. Also, I think that I'm curious because you mentioned how when you were talking to the cardiologist, he let it slip that her issue is a little bit larger. And do you feel like he prepared you adequately for what is to come, or do you have how do you feel about the fact that you guys had to go home and like kind of research it and figure it out on yourself? I'm just curious because I know that how I feel and I felt when doctors are kind of giving you little hints, but they're not telling you everything, and then you go home and you're researching, and the good and bad that comes from that.
Well, actually, what we researched is that it might be open heart or it might be catheterization. I think for the VSD. Yeah. So he was not giving us the whole picture the first appointment. I thought he was wonderful the first appointment. I think he's the only doctor I've ever had who I felt was just going to take as much time as needed with us.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't think I've ever felt that because you always have to be somewhere. But I really, when you're breaking the news to brand new parents that a newborn that the child has a heart defect, I mean, that's a time, if any, to just be like, you have all the time in the world with me. So that's how I felt with him. And he was also quite experienced. I think he's probably in his 70s. But he did not, when I say let it slip, it was the third appointment when he didn't do an echocardiogram. And this was actually the last appointment we were out with her. For her heart, he just listened with the stethoscope and he said that it sounded like the opening was getting restricted. So he had told us that it was not the kind of hole that could close on its own, but that there was an aortic valve that might come down and block the hole, and to keep the blood from flowing back into the other chamber. And then that would basically, she wouldn't need surgery if that were the case. Yeah. So that's what we were praying for. We were also praying for that it would miraculously close on its own. And when she was, when was this? Like, she was 4 weeks old or so when we saw him the third time. And he just said something like, oh yeah, well the hole this big, you would need open heart surgery. And because we had asked at that point, like, is it open heart or catheterization? But he says that he said at the time he was optimistic that surgery was going to be less likely. And she's not panting anymore. So we're supposed to go back on the 14th of November. So it's something like, less than 2 weeks. And I am very optimistic that he'll find that it's okay, because she's breathing fine now, which, I mean, that's a huge answer to prayer. And anyway.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit how that has impacted breastfeeding from the start up until where you are now at 7 weeks postpartum? I mean, because it started off a little bit rocky, but I felt like you guys really got into a groove.
Well, she is my fourth baby to nurse, so that was very helpful. I think it would have been extremely difficult if she were my first, or maybe even my second, or third. I don't know. But so I knew what to do, even though she's a different child than the other three are. I kind of knew the mechanics of it. And so I had that experience, but she was pretty unresponsive. Like I said, I mean, she barely was crying. She was just sleeping all the time. She was very lethargic, and she was too weak, or her muscle tone was too low to suck enough. Like she had a pretty good suck, I think I remember you saying, but she would lose steam after a few seconds. So we were feeding her. Actually, someone had just handed me down, when you have a home birth, you have to buy your own home birth supplies, which is, I mean, it's still way cheaper than having a hospital birth, but someone who handed me down some supplies had some like 5mm syringes, and I'd been like, what are these? Because I never used those before, and they came in handy. So we were feeding her with those, just 5mm by 5mm, just to like try to keep her awake, and then latch her on and see if she could suck a little bit. I was also pumping. And so we were doing that for like almost a week until she finally was really was able to nurse.
Yeah. And that's a lot. Like you were processing a lot. Like, this is your fourth baby, so you have 3 other kids. You're putting baby to breast, you're pumping, you're syringe feeding, and all of that cycle is happening every 2 to 3 hours. Plus you're processing all the emotions of finding out that your daughter has Down syndrome, and has heart issues. And yeah, so do you feel like, did you, at that point, or at what point did you ever reach out and join like a support group or look for resources on Down syndrome babies? And what have you found has been like the most helpful thing that has allowed you to kind of process this?
Well, you sent me something very a helpful resource, which was this ebook on nursing babies with Down syndrome. And again, Megan, I'm sorry, but it was such a blur. But I did read that book. I mean, it's amazing the things you do when you, like, I can't remember, most of what was going on in those first few weeks. But
I can't imagine why.
I know, but I read that book.
It's not like you had a lot going on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And also, we had to have 2 people feeding her, right? Because Alex is holding her while I'm putting this.
Yeah. It's a 2-person job.
So, like, no one was watching the kids. We're like, go to the neighbor's house. I mean, it was like really
free-range parenting out there.
Yeah, definitely free-range parenting. Like, hope we're not playing in the street this time again. But yeah, we actually had some great support, and but it was a go period of time just for that first week. But sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
Okay. No, so the book, the ebook was really helpful.
The ebook, yes,
did you ever reach out and get connected with like a community of maybe other moms that have?
I have not yet.
Yeah,
I have not yet. And I've talked a little bit. So I have a friend of a friend who was so sweet, and she lives somewhere far away, and she came and dropped off this book called like The First Month of Your Child with Down syndrome's life or something. It was like that was very helpful too. And I texted with her a little bit, but no, I actually didn't want to get connected with other parents right away. And I actually still haven't really done it. And
I'm glad you said that though, because I'm glad that you said that you haven't done it yet, or that, because I think that one thing I want people to know listening is that it's, we can have this list of things that like, okay, we need to do all these things. It's good to do, but we don't all have to do them on a certain time frame, and we all process things differently. And I think that some people may be in the boat where they're like, I need to reach out and talk to other moms and connect and just be like, okay, we're all going through this. And some women be like, no, I need more time. And however, I think it's important to respect the way that everybody approaches their situation differently and processes things differently. Why did I feel like that's like a tongue twister to say processes? Processes things differently. Yeah. So, it sounds like everything that you've done, you were really in touch with yourself, and you've known, okay, this is what I need at this moment. And
yeah, I think, because people kept saying, are you going to get in touch with other people in the Down syndrome community? And I think my reaction was, I just want to enjoy my baby. Like, this is a special time, that will come later. I mean, I'm sure that will come later. But also when you talk to people, you get all their baggage too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was truly enjoying her, and I was truly, whereas what I was reading was, people are like, oh, people having much more negative experiences when their kids were born than I did. I mean, I did have some negative feelings, I'll be honest. I thought, well, what if is she going to die? I mean, like, would it be better if she died because she's disabled? I had a thought like that at one point, which I certainly don't anymore. But I didn't want to be connected with people right away when I was so vulnerable and still getting to know her, because then I was afraid they were going to, everyone has different experiences, and they were going to kind of project their experiences onto my daughter.
You knew to protect your space.
And to protect her in a way, from having these labels on her before she was even, a few days old. So, yeah. I haven't done it yet, and as it turns out, she is thriving. She is doing so well, and actually, we had a meeting last week with Arlington County's early intervention services, because as a child with Down syndrome, she automatically qualifies for that. And a social worker came out with 2 therapists, a speech therapist and an occupational therapist. So this was when she was like 5, almost 6 weeks old. And at the end, they said, I mean, she's meeting all of the developmental milestones that she should be. She's characteristic of a normal baby her age.
I love it.
I mean, there was a speech therapist who came, was very experienced, but she was one of those kind of like seen it all types, you know, like unsmiling, and she was like, how's the baby doing? The baby, she was napping when they arrived. She's like, how's she doing? And I said, she's doing great. And she was like, she looked surprised, and but by the end of the meeting, she was literally laughing with delight when she saw Anna Louisa able to kind of be on her tummy, moving her head back and forth, looking around, like connecting so well. And they said, yeah, cognitively, emotionally, and physically, she's characteristic of a normal baby her age. So
that feels so good. That feels good. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, so is she not going to? I was expecting all this therapy right away, and so she doesn't need any kinds of therapy yet, and they said no. And so everything I'd read had been, you know, my baby needed this, and that wasn't the case for her. Now she's failed her hearing test, and we're still waiting on a diagnostic hearing test for her. You know, there will be other things I expect, but like in this moment, right now we're at 7 weeks of life. She's just doing great.
I love it. That's so good to hear. I love it. What are your hopes and your aspirations for her in the future?
That's a good question. I mean, I want her to be able to achieve the things that she wants to be able to achieve. You know, I want her to reach her full potential, just like my other kids. I want her to love Jesus the way I want my other kids to. You know, I want her to be a positive effect on other people, to bring joy to people, right? That's what you want. I think about that more with her, because there is sort of that positive stereotype of kids with Down syndrome that they do bring joy to others by just being around. But yeah, so I would like her to be a joy spreader.
I love that, a joy spreader, absolutely, and she will be 100%.
I mean, she already is. The babies are.
Check, right? She is. Yes, that is so awesome. I love that. So do you feel like breastfeeding, and I know that you were baby wearing with your other kids, and maybe you've done a little bit with her. Do you think that that's helped you bond with her? And do you feel like, because there is some research to show that like breastfeeding helps with the, you know, Down syndrome babies can sometimes have more issues with sleep apnea and speech development because of the muscle tone in their jaw and their, you know, so breastfeeding helps with oral exercises that they get practice at every feeding. So do you feel like, was that something that you kind of learned as you were going, or is it something that you've like researched and you're like, I knew I wanted to breastfeed, you breastfed your other babies? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, the ebook you sent me, that's kind of what made me realize how important it was to breastfeed babies with Down syndrome. Also, that immune support. She has shown signs of maybe having like a little bit of a weaker immune system. Like she's gotten some coughs. My other newborns never had coughs right away. But yeah, so the literature you sent me talked about how breastfeeding can help with speech development. I think also like the palate of her mouth might be smaller, and that breastfeeding even helps with that. Like it just helps strengthen those muscles. I had breastfed my other babies, and so I was intent to breastfeed her as well. But it really did motivate me when I read that literature that you'd sent me, when it was hard, that we did really need to keep pushing, and there was the sort of possibility. It wasn't an immediate possibility, but there was kind of a possibility looming in the background that we might need to use formula to supplement. That's why I was just pumping and syringe feeding her, and we just kind of kept going with it, and we're like, we're gonna do this, and if we can possibly, because she had this heart defect, she was burning calories more quickly, so we were having to kind of she was losing all this weight. I mean, she was born big, but then she was losing all this weight, So we were really concerned about getting her back to birth weight and everything. But I mean, she did. Kids with Down syndrome also are on a different growth chart. So it takes her a little bit longer to gain that weight.
So we talked about that. Did you ever confirm if babies with Down syndrome have their own growth chart, like specifically like breastfed babies with Down syndrome? Because I didn't know, actually. And I didn't know if that's something that you were able to find.
I don't know about breastfed babies, and then particularly babies who have Down syndrome and a heart defect. We never did, because she did start gaining weight. Okay. So we did, our pediatrician did send us the growth chart for babies with Down syndrome. There's a different one for girls and boys, just like there is for the ones you see at the pediatrician's office when you take your baby. So we do have that, and so we looked at that at one point where I was getting a little worried that maybe she wasn't gaining enough, and we found that she was gaining what she should be. But there was that added difficulty, I guess, of how many calories she was burning. But
she's done great. I love that.
Yeah,
so great. Looking back, are there any resources or tips that you would want to leave other moms with that maybe are just going through it right now, have just found out their baby's diagnosis? What would you say to them to kind of get them started off on the right foot at baby's birth?
I mean, I should have brought this down with me for this podcast, so I'll send it to you later. So the book that was given to me by the friend of a friend was pretty helpful, just because it was very comprehensive in knowing what medical issues she might have, because I was ignorant of the fact that babies with Down syndrome were then possibly going to have all these other medical issues, and that's why it's called a syndrome, right? So, because our pediatrician is lovely, she's great, but she's not a developmental pediatrician, so she does not see that many children with disabilities. So I kind of wanted just to be sure that we were covering all the bases. And so that book was helpful, but I can't remember the name of it. It was like one of these little tiny books that's published in this like very small publishing company. I would say though, my more comprehensive answer would be to follow your gut.
Yeah, I love that.
I would definitely say follow your gut, because you're so connected with your baby, and no one's going to know your baby better than you. Even people who know a lot of stuff about medicine and have experience with Down syndrome babies, like, it's still your baby. And I think we have this instinct to protect them and to nurture them and to love them. And ultimately, loving our babies is the most important thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I love that. And I think that what you said applies to everybody. So for the people listening, even if they don't resonate, like if Down syndrome is not the medical complexity that they have, or even if people that are just tuning in to kind of learn more about this, that is an important message to hear, even if you've just got a healthy baby, but is going through a bout of illness. Nobody knows your baby like you do. Nobody is with your baby 24 hours a day, seeing all the things like you are. So moms and dads, caretakers, are able to catch everything. And so following your intuition is so key. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and there have been a couple times that I have had an intuition about something, and so the time that I regretted not following it was so she failed this hearing test, the newborn screening. We did it twice, and the first time she failed, the second time it was this older machine, and the result was inconclusive. So then I had to go try to find a place that would conduct the diagnostic. It's called the brainstem response, automatic brainstem response test that they need to do. And Children's in DC was one of the only places that does the test in the area. And I talked to the scheduler, and I just thought, I just don't like this scheduler. She does not seem competent.
Oh, no.
And that's just how I felt. And I try to be nice, but I was just like, I just don't, there's something, I don't like her. And I have this bad impression of children's also like getting passed down the chain of, you call this one place, then they're like, oh, sorry, we don't do it here. You need to call this place. So I was already at my wit's end anyway, trying to find a place to do this test. But so we went to her, the appointment for her hearing test at Children's in DC on Friday. And it turns out she scheduled us for the wrong test. So we did, yeah. And not only that, but 4 people, you know, myself included, had the wrong test scheduled for them that week.
You know, it's ironic that you say that, because we were supposed to see the nephrologist like a month ago. And like, I don't know about you guys, but like, I've taken off work. My husband's taken off work. We had to find a babysitter. It's an hour drive.
Like, are you going to pay my babysitter?
Exactly. It's an hour drive. We get up there, we're waiting, you know, and they're like, we don't have you on the schedule for today. And I'm like, we're not in network. I know we're on the schedule today because I had to get a referral letter from our regular pediatrician to anytime we go to the nephrologist there. And I'm just like, we planned this months ago. The date is on this referral paper, and we like the whole thing, and we had to go home. I was.
Are you serious? Was this at Children's?
Yes.
What
is with the scheduler? What? Yeah, and this is not the first time. It's not, and it always happens. It always happens when we go to nephrology. And I don't know what it is there, but I was just like, I'm over it.
So not only that, but apparently they do the test at the Fairfax location. Like I talked to multiple schedulers, and I was like, I mean, are you sure they don't do the Fairfax? I really don't have to go to Columbia Heights. I just don't want to have to do that. And like, no, we don't do that here. And so the audiologist, I think, was mortified because she was very confessional. She was just like, I'm so sorry, you're like the 4th people this has happened to this week. We really need to retrain the schedulers. But I don't know. I mean, that sounds like it might, if you also in nephrology were getting all messed up, I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
Right? I'm telling you.
But it adds insult to injury for sure. Like
100%. It's just and it's layered because we are families with like, we're already stressed out. We're already stressed out. We're already worried our babies. And then you're like, just kidding.
I mean, it was so bad. It was kind of funny. And I was like, we have a broken healthcare system.
Yes. Oh God. Oh Lord. That's a whole, that would be a whole other podcast, right?
For sure.
Oh my God, we could spend so many hours.
I mean, I've been grateful for the good medical care that we have gotten. I've been impressed with the pediatric cardiology at Nova Fairfax. I'll give them a shout out. Love Story. She's awesome. But I would not consider her a medical establishment. I would consider her a better alternative.
Yeah. Alternative care. Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming. Honestly, I feel like it has been a privilege to talk to you. I have gotten a lot out of it, so I know that everybody listening has gotten a lot out of it. I really appreciate your time so much. So the resource that you mentioned, the book, I'm going to get that from you. I'm going to add it into like the notes, the chat notes for other people who can find it when they're listening to this podcast. I'm also going to add some resources for families who do have Down syndrome babies, just some like national organizations. If people do want to get connected and get more resources, that will also be added in the notes to this podcast. So thank you very, very much for coming on. And for everybody out there listening, like we are going to have more great people come, out and talk to us. I've got another parent actually who is going to be coming on in the following week, and her daughter is now in elementary school. So she has spent a lot more time navigating, the medical system, and gained a lot of knowledge about the ins and outs of, having a medically complex child and hitting certain milestones. So I'm going to have her come on and we're going to talk to her, and that'll be really good for parents to hear who are navigating this process with older children. So thank you again, Julia. It was a pleasure talking to you, and you go and be.
Oh, thank you. It was great talking to you as well, Megan.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all for joining us on today's episode of Baby Wearing and Breastfeeding, Nurturing Miracles.
I hope you found our discussion enlightening and that you leave feeling supported and empowered. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Tune in next week for more insights and conversations that connect us all in the shared experience of parenting. Until then, take care and cherish every miracle with your little ones.